In this video, I'm going to walk you through a complete authentication flow in Next.js from end to end without using any sort of third-party authentication library. Essentially, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be pretty much rolling our own auth. Now, as to whether or not you want to do this in production, I'll leave that decision up to you. That is outside of the scope of this video. But what is in the scope of this video is to really understand the mental model of authentication and actually see an example end-to-end in Next.js of how to actually implement a robust and simple authentication flow directly in Next.js. We're going to be using all of the best practices and design patterns, and we're going to write clean and simple code that is also robust and gets the job done and properly handles authentication. So get ready, because this is going to be a very educational video. Now, before we get to that, I just want to quickly mention that I also have a course, if you didn't know. It's called Project React, and it goes way more in depth than anything that I teach in this video, and honestly, anything that I teach in any of my other YouTube videos. And I'm actually in the process right now of working on the extended version, which is the updated version that has more modules, more code, and more content overall. And if you get the course now, you're actually going to get that update completely for free. So now is the best time to get it. If you're ever on the fence or you just really want to learn React completely from A to Z, this is the best resource. And again, if you get it now, you get the update when it comes out in a couple of months completely for free. There you go. It is going to be the first link in the description. All right, so let's begin. Let's talk about authentication in Next.js. Now, before we write any code, I think it's going to be helpful for us to have a little visual example of what it is that we're actually going to be doing. What are the different steps and where did they go and how are they connected together to really create a robust authentication flow in Next.js? And the tool that I'm using here for all of this whiteboard stuff is called Eraser, and they're actually the sponsor of this video. Now, I want to be clear and transparent. I was the one that reached out to them if they wanted to sponsor this video because I genuinely love this product. It's a great whiteboarding tool, and I'm going to use it for this video. They have a ton of features, way more than I can ever show or do justice in this video. But if you want to check it out, I highly recommend it. It is my favorite whiteboarding software. It's also great for teams, and they have a ton of AI features. I'll leave a link in the description. Check it out and tell them hi, that you came from me. All right, so let's begin. So here we have a client and then we have a server. To really implement authentication in any application, not just Next.js or React, you of course need to have a client and you need to have a server. The client and the server both are focused on different things. They have different responsibilities, and the magic comes when you combine them together in an efficient way to create a really robust authentication flow. So let's start in the client. So the client, of course, is anything that is user facing, right? Anything that lives on the browser, anything that the user has to interact with. In this case, what we're going to do, I'm going to come here and draw an arrow. We are going to have a login form. This is going to be the form that a user can see and work on and actually enter their credentials to log into the application. So I'm going to come here and do login form like this. So we're going to have to come in our code and actually create a login form and have the user interact with that login form. Then that login form is going to have, let's keep it simple, an email and a password, right? And that is going to be sent directly to the server for validation. So this login form over here, let's create another arrow, is going to come here and is going to go to the server, and this is going to send the email and password to the server, Can I type password? There we go, third time's the charm. It is going to send the email and the password directly to the server, and the server is going to take it off from there and handle validation. Now the client, specifically this login form over here, is going to need some code, some functions to actually be able to send this data to the server for validation. So one of those things, let me come here and make an arrow. One of those things is going to be server action. So we're going to do server actions like this. These are going to be functions that live on the server. They are not the responsibility of the client to actually own, but the client is going to use them and is going to call them with the email and the password, and that's how it's going to send the information to the server. But then the server, once it does its validation, is also going to communicate back with the client in the logging form, and the client will have to react. And for that, we're going to be using a new hook from React that is called use action state. So let me come here, let me do use action state. This is a hook that goes in a client component, and it works with a server action. And then the result of the server action, if I can get the arrow here, the result of the server action is going to go into the login form, and we're going to be able to display that to the user, and the user will know what's going on. If there's an error in our form, if something is wrong, we'll show that to the user, and the user can then take appropriate action to hopefully fix the error and then send the information correctly. And that is going to come from this use action state that is going to give us some state over here. So let's put state, and that's going to be loading errors etc. That is going to be the state that we get from useActionState, the hook, and that is going to go all the way back into the login form so that we can directly display to the user. Again, this is a visual representation of everything that is currently going on in a client in terms of this authentication flow. Now, on the other hand, we have the server. The server is going to receive the information from the front end, the email and the password in this case, and then the server is going to validate this data. So let's make an arrow here and let's do validate like this. Now the validation is going to have either of two outcomes. So the first outcome might be an error. So let's come here, let's do error like this, and let's make this a little bit red so we can visually see that this is an error. It might have an error. And if we have an error, let's make an arrow here from validate. We're going to put it this way. What's going on? Oh, there you go. We have an error. Let's do it like this. That is one case. Or the other case is we're going to have a success. So we'll do success over here. And we're going to make this green to represent a green arrow, a green text for success. Let's make another arrow and then put it like this. And there we go. So the validate function can either throw an error or it can throw a success. Now, if we have an error, that error is going to be directly returned over here to the login form. And the login form is going to receive that as state over here, state errors, and we're going to be able to display that to the user. In the case of a successful version, so everything was validated, the credentials are correct, everything is in order, what this is going to do is this is now going to create a JWT token to store in a cookie safely to be able to identify the user and to know that the user is now officially authenticated. So we're going to write here JWT token and we're going to put it here. Let's make the token white as well, because it's neutral, and let's attach it here to the arrow. There we go. I just love this software. It's so cool, and it like produces some really beautiful whiteboards. Again, really love it. Check it out in the description. Highly recommend. Now this JWT token is then going to get stored. Let's come here. Let's make another arrow. Is then going to get stored over here. We're going to put it at the top to really signify this. It's going to get stored in something that is called an HTTP only secure cookie. Right? This is a little bit big, but there you go. We can make it work. It is going to get stored in an HTTP only secure cookie. And what this means, let's put it here. What this means is that this cookie cannot be read by JavaScript on the client. It is HTTP only, which means that it can only be read by the server, which is secure. We don't want to leak this JWT token to the client. This should only be the responsibility of the server side. And then the last piece that we need is, now that the user is authenticated, we also need a way to determine if the user can access certain routes or not, which maybe are protected routes, right, that require authenticated users to be able to access. And that is going to happen through something that we call a middleware. So we're going to put here a middleware like this. That is middleware with an E. There we go. Middleware, and then let's put the arrow here as well. We're going to do this, and then we're going to do connect the middleware back to the server. The middleware is going to be responsible for running on every single request, on every single route, and then checking that HTTP only cookie, which again, we can do this because this is going to be on the server side. And that middleware is then going to determine what the user is allowed to see or not. So this is, in a nutshell, a very simplified version of a full authentication flow in Next.js with all of the different pieces that we're going to have to implement. So we have the client, we have the server, everything has its own responsibility, and everything works together really efficiently. So now that we understand how this authentication is going to work and we have a clear mental model of all the different pieces, let's now go here to VSCode and let's start implementing this from scratch. Well, not from scratch, I have a few pieces already created, but let's start implementing all the different pieces of this authentication flow. So let's quickly go here and just look at the code that we currently have. So this is a Next.js application. It is running Next.js 15, which at the time of recording this video is the latest version of Next 15. And we're of course going to be using all of the latest and greatest from React 19 as well, all the hooks and everything to really make sure that we do this the modern way. So here we have the SRC folder. We have a couple of pages. So we have a dashboard page over here. It's a simple page. There's nothing more to it. We're going to eventually want to protect this route and only allow an authenticated user to be able to access this route. Then we also have over here a login page. This is again a simple page. It just uses the login form component, which is the component over here that you can see. This component over here, this is what we have. Now this component, there's already some code here, but there's no actual functionality. There's just the HTML markup for a simple form, but nothing is actually happening. When you press submit here, it doesn't do anything. We have no functions created. We're going to have to create all of those right now. And then more importantly, I have this lib folder here with a session file. This file is going to be important because this is what is going to handle our JWT token. So here I'm using the Jose library, which is a pretty great library for handling JWT tokens. And we just have two functions here, which we're going to be using. We have the encrypt function, which will take a payload, that payload can have a user ID and an expires at property. So again, pretty simple. And then we'll sign a JWT token and return that token using this code here. And then we have the reverse function. We have decrypt, which takes here a session that is going to be a JWT token, and then tries to verify that token. And then if it can be verified, it will take the payload and return the payload. This payload is going to have the user ID, which is what is going to allow us to uniquely identify the user and to know which user is currently authenticated in our actual application. Right, so this is all the code that we have here. By the way, you're going to have this code available on GitHub. It'll be linked in the description. You'll also have the full code at the end of the video, so you can play around with this, get really a feel for it, because I genuinely think that that's the best way to learn this. Cool, so now we understand what code we're working with. Let's now go back here and let's think about what we want to do first. So first, it makes sense for us to focus on the client because that's usually the easiest part. And the first entry point is the login form. Let's connect the login form. Let's add some functionality. Let's add some server actions, and let's actually send the email and the password directly to the server for validation. So the first thing that we're going to do in this login form is we're going to be using the new use action state to get a server action, to get some state, and to be able to pass it to the form's action property. So what we're going to do is we're going to do const state and then login action. And that is going to be use action state. We're going to import this directly from React. And now this takes in two arguments. The first one is going to be a server action, which I actually forgot to show you. We have this actions file over here. It just has two functions, login and logout. They're currently empty. We're going to have to implement them ourselves. And we have the login schema over here, which is using auth to basically set the schema of our actual properties in our login. And then we have a test user over here, which we're going to use to be able to check and mock as if we're checking a database to make sure that the only user that can log into our application is this test user here. We're going to keep things simple. There's not a real database involved, but this is sufficient for us to get working. So here at the top, we have use server, which means that every single function in here is going to be a server action, right? And we have login. So we're going to have to import this login function here and use it directly in our action state as the first argument. So we're going to do login like this, and we're going to import this from /actions. And then we need to pass a second argument here, which is going to be the initial state that is going to get this state variable over here. But for now, we don't have any initial state. We don't need to worry about any initial state. So we can just provide undefined like this, and we are done. So use action state is a new hook from React that essentially takes a server action, gives you back the actual action property that you can put on the form, and then some state over here that is going to get updated as this action is running and return some values. So then we can take this login action, we can come here and we can do action like this and do login action like this to the actual form. So now this form has an action property. When we submit the form, it is going to send this data. It is going to call login with the actual previous state. That is the signature required when using use action state as a hook. And then the actual form data of the form, which is going to contain our email and a password that we can use to validate against the schema. And also something important, we have this submit button here, which is in a separate component, and that is done on purpose because we need to use the use form status hook, which is going to give us access to a pending property. And this only works by putting the actual component inside of a form. If this was outside of a form, it wouldn't work. We have to put this as a separate component inside of the form because the use form status is going to access the status of this specific form. So it has to be within it. It has to be a child of it. So now that's it. We've done the first step. We can now go here to our actions and we can start implementing the actual login action that is going to handle logging the user in. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to validate the data that we receive from ForData against the login schema. And if everything is correct, or if there's an error, we're going to return an error. And if anything is correct, we are just going to continue on the next step. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to do const result. I'm going to do login schema dot save parse. And I'm going to put here object dot from entries, and I'm going to give here form data like this. Now, this is not going to be a tutorial on how to validate data. I'm expecting you to know this. If you want to get up to speed on Zod and how all of this works, check out a video that I did just a while ago. I have a complete tutorial on Zod. It'll get you up to speed. It's really great. But essentially what we're doing is we're just taking the object from entries, we're converting form data into an object, and then we're safe parsing it into the login schema. And this result property will tell us if the parse has been successful. So if the email is an actual email, right, of the correct format, and if the password is a string that has at least 8 characters, this result is going to be successful. And then we're going to come here and we're going to check if not result.success. So if the validation failed, we're simply going to return an object over here that is going to have an errors property, which is going to be result.error.flatten. and we're going to do here field errors like this. This is specific to Zod and how it works. We're just taking all of the actual errors from all of the fields and we're just putting them here. So it's going to be an array of strings essentially, which we can use in our component, in our front end. And now going back quickly to the login form, if we hover over the state property over here, you're going to see that now the type of it updated. So the type of this can either be an object with an errors property that has email and password, which can either be undefined or arrays of strings, or the state can be undefined, right? Because in the case where it's successful, we're just not returning anything. So now we're going to be able to use the state property to display the errors in our form if we have errors. That's how this works. Then once we're here, we can now assume that the actual validation is correct. So the email and password are in the correct format. So now we can actually start validating this against our test user to make sure that they match the credentials of the test user. So we're going to do const email password is going to be equal to result.data like this to make this a little bit easier for us. And then we're just going to do if email is not equal to test user.email or password is not equal to test user.password, we are going to return exactly the same thing. We're just going to do return another errors object. We're going to do errors like this, and we're going to put here, let's do email. Let's put this as a string and let's do invalid email or password, right? Right, so this is simulating actually fetching from the database a user with this email and then checking the password if it matches, right? We're not doing this, we're keeping things simple. But if it doesn't match, if the email and password is wrong, we're returning the same object with the errors property, and we're just gonna put the error in the email, even if the password is not correct, because generally you wanna be a little bit obscure and you don't want to directly tell the user, oh, your password isn't correct or your email isn't correct. That's a little bit less secure. And putting this in the email, we're being ambiguous and we're saying that either the email or the password isn't correct. You can do something with it, try to fix it and try it again. And then once we have this, we can now come here, and at this point, the credentials are correct. We have a user, it matches the actual user. We can now actually create a session for the user, create a JWT token, store that in the cookies, and then redirect the user to our dashboard, which is going to be our protected route. Now for this, we're going to have to come here to our session lib, and we're going to have to add a new function because we don't have one. We're going to have to add a function that is going to create a session. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to do export async function create session, and this is going to take a user ID that is going to be of type string, and we're going to do const expires at, so this is going to be the actual date that the session expires at. So we're going to do new date like this, and we're going to pass it here date.now plus 7 times 24 times 60 times 60 times 1,000, and this is essentially going to be 7 days from now. So we're going to expire this token in 7 days. You can choose a different property if you want a different value. It's completely up to you and what the project needs. For this tutorial, we're just going to keep things simple and we're going to put 7 days. And then we're going to do const session. That is going to be our JWT token, and that is going to be await encrypt, and we're going to pass it here an object with user ID and expires at like this. So we're calling this encrypt function with the payload, the user ID, and expires at, and that is going to give us here a string that is going to be our JWT token. And then with this, all that we have to do is store this in an HTTP only secure cookie, and we can do this by calling the cookies, importing this from next headers like this. We're going to call this and then set, we're going to pass it here session. And here as the properties, we are going to pass HTTP only true. That is going to make it again HTTP only. We're going to pass secure. We're going to do true. And we're also going to do expires, and we're going to put expires at like this, and there we go, we have our cookie. And actually I'm missing here the actual session, so it would help if I actually put it. There we go, we have a cookies, we're setting it as the session key, we're passing the session, and these are the options for the cookies. Now you can put more options in here if you want to be a little bit more secure. Again, I'm keeping things simple very much for this video, but go look into all of the options and put them again based on what the project needs. And that's it. Now we can come back here to our actions and we can import this function and actually use it. So we can do await create session. We're going to import this from lib session. We're going to pass here test user.id because again, we're simulating that this is our actual user. What is the problem here? Oh, I believe it's a type mismatch. Let's just put 1 to keep things simple. There we go. We're going to await create session. Now we actually have a session that is stored in our cookies, which means that the user is authenticated. So all that we have to do is just redirect. We can import this from next navigation and we can put dashboard like this. And there we go. We have our login function. It is handling validation validation. It is actually checking if the user exists with the correct email and password, and it's creating the session and then redirecting us to the dashboard. Now, the last thing that we need to do in terms of this is we have this state over here, which can contain errors. Optionally, we want to use those and display those in the actual UI. So we can come here and right below our div over here for each error, we can do state $.errors $.email and here we're going to do a paragraph with class name text red 500, and we're going to put here state.errors.email like this, and now we have an actual error for our email. We're going to do the same thing over here with the password. We're going to put this, where did I do it? There we go. For the password, we're just going to rename this to password like this. I always type password wrong. Word. There we go. Now we go. So now we have fully set up our form. We're using the state. It's connected to the actions, and based on what this function returns, that's what we're going to see in our UI. So let's test this. So let's go back here to our actual form. We have here, let's go to /login, and we have here the form. So first of all, if I press here, you're going to see that we actually get our errors. We have invalid email address, and then password must be at least 8 characters. Why do I have a name? Oh, I messed up. This is from an earlier version. Forget the name. Forget that happened. It's gone. There you go. Email and password. There we go. We have email and password, and there we go. Everything is fine. So now if I do something, let's put an incorrect email. So let's do incorrect@email.com, and we're going to do 1, 2, 3. We're going to put this, and now you see it's saying that, oh, the password was wrong. Right. Sorry. Email. We're going to incorrect@email.com. We're going to do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And now we should get invalid email or password. This is the second validation that we did, right? So the result was correct. And then we did here, we checked against the test user and it was incorrect. That's the error that we're seeing. This works correctly. So now let's get the actual correct email. So let's just copy this, contact@cosmsolutions.io, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's put this in the form. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now if you press login, we should be redirected to our dashboard. And there we go. We are on the dashboard. Everything worked successfully, just as we expect. And now if you actually open up here our console and zoom it up a little bit and go here to application and then go here to cookies and go here to localhost, we're going to see one of those cookies is the session over here, and that is our actual JWT token. This is the token that got created that has our user ID, has the expires at property, and we can now use this in our application to actually know that the user is authenticated. So going back to Eraser over here, what we've done so far is we did all of the client part. So we have the login form, server actions, use action state, and then the state as well. We also did this part of sending the email and password to the server. Then we did all of the validation process. We handled the error case and we returned the errors to the front end to be able to display. We also handled the success case. We created our JWT token. We stored it in an HTTP only secure cookie. And now the last thing for us to do is to handle this in the middleware, because currently if we have here, if I go back to the dashboard, for example, this is fine. We're logged in. But if I go here to the login page, we're going to see the login page. As a logged in user, which we currently are right now, we shouldn't see this page. We should automatically be redirected to the dashboard. And also, if we're on the dashboard and we're logged out, we should be redirected to the login page, which currently is not supported. And that is all going to be handled with this middleware here, which again is going to run before every single request, is going to make that check based on this HTTP only cookie. And then we're going to be able to actually redirect the user if they're logged in or not, and they're trying to access a protected or a public route. So let's do it. So coming back to our application here, let's go here to src and let's make a file at the root of src. We're going to call this one middleware.ts. Now this is specific to Next.js, right? This is a Next.js video. The way that you actually do this in your framework might differ, right? But the concept remains the same. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to do export default async function middleware like this, and that is going to take the rec and is going to be a next request, which we can import from next server, and this is going to be the body of our function. Then over here, what I want to do is I want to create 2 arrays of roots. I want to do const protected roots, and that is going to be over here. We're going to do /dashboard. These are going to be the roots that a user has to be authenticated for them to actually access, and then we're going to do const public root equals /login like this. So we're now going to be able to use this in the body of this function. Then first we're going to do const path equals request.nextURL.path name like this. Then we're going to do const is protected root is going to be protected roots.includes path like this. We're going to do the same thing for public. So we're going to do here public like this. We're going to basically check against these two arrays here if the path that we're currently trying to access is a protected or a private route or a public route, sorry. Then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get the actual session from the cookie to be able to make a decision based on what we do with the actual user. So we're going to do const cookie equals cookies from next headers as well. We're going to do this dot get, and we're going to try to get the session. We're going to put this as a question mark because we might not have a session. We might not have a session cookie. Then we're going to do value like this. And we're going to try to decrypt this using the decrypt function from our session library over here, the decrypt function. So we're going to do const session equals await decrypt. And we're going to pass it here, the cookie like this. So now this session over here is either going to have a JWT payload or undefined. And if it has a JWT payload, which is this, it's going to return the payload over here that is going to contain our user ID and expires at. So we'll be able to use the user ID to determine if the user is actually logged in. So we're going to do if is protected root and we don't have a session, or we don't have a session.user ID like this. What we're going to do is we're just going to return next response dot redirect, and we're going to pass it here /login like this. Then we're going to do the opposite. We're going to do if is public root and we have a session dot user ID. We're going to want to redirect the user to the dashboard, right? If they're logged in, it's no point for them to actually access the logged in page. So we're going to do dashboard like this. Otherwise, if we're not in any of these scenarios, we don't need to do anything and we can just pass the next function. So we can do return next response dot next and let the next section of the middleware or any other next step handle it. This is not our responsibility. We're only concerned with the actual user here. And actually, I did it quite differently. Let me just put this here. It doesn't quite work like this. Doing it this way actually works. You pass a new URL directly to the redirect function and that works. There we go. Now with this, we can save and we can go back here to our application. And now we're on the dashboard. So we can reload this and we're fine because we are currently logged in. But now if I go here and I put login, you're going to see that we're still on the dashboard, right? It's not letting a logged in user access the login function. Now at the same time, if I come here and I actually remove this cookie, the session cookie over here, so it is completely gone. We're now on the dashboard. If I refresh now, we're going to be redirected automatically to the login page. And this happens at the server level, at the middleware level, right? That's how Next.js works. That's how this middleware works. It intercepts the request. It then makes this check. Is the user logged in? What are they trying to access? And if something is invalid, it is returning a redirect and redirecting the user to the correct place that the user should be. And honestly, that's pretty much it. The only thing that we can actually do now is we can come back here to our actions, right? And what we can do is we can just create a logout function. We already have it. We can just edit the logout function. Let me just see how I actually did it over here. So first, before we do that, we're going to have to come here to our session and we're just going to have to create our delete session function. So just like we created create session, we're going to also do delete section. So we're going to do export async function delete session. That is going to be a function that takes in no arguments and it's just going to call cookies dot delete and we're going to pass session like this and it's just going to delete the session from the cookies and that's it. And then in our actions over here in the logout, all we can do is we can just do await delete session. We're going to call this and then we're going to redirect to the login page and that is going to be it. Now we have a logout function which we can use directly in our, let's see, dashboard. We can use it in our dashboard function. Instead of doing this, we can just do button and then on click, we can do a function over here and we can just directly call log out. We can call the server action without a problem. And we can just close the button and do log out like this. And now we can save. And now if you go back here to our application, so we have here the login. So we can do contact, where is it? Contact at causeandsolutions.io, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We can log in. We're automatically, we forgot to put use client. That's my bad. We do use client here, right? We have to work in a client component. Now it's going to work. So now we're here. We have the dashboard, right? We reload. Everything is fine. If I press logout, we're back to the login page and our authentication fully works. And honestly, that's pretty much it. It is a little bit of code, but it's actually quite simple. There's a few pieces in here that are really important, but we've essentially handled all the different pieces. So now I'm just going to go back here to the actual whiteboard because again, now I think it's a little bit more clear what we've actually done, right? We did all the pieces required. We had stuff on the client, we had stuff on the server. The client handles the form, takes server action, uses use action state to get actual data back, the state to be able to show the UI, loading and errors and all of that. Then it will send the email and the password to the server. server validates, in the error case, returns back something to the front end, in the success case, creates a JWT token, stores it in the HTTP secure cookie, and then the middleware accesses that cookie and determines if the user can access things or not. This is, of course, very simple, and this is, again, rolling your own authentication. And again, I'm not going to tell you if you should use this in production or not. I'll leave that up to you. That is outside of the scope of this video. What I wanted to show you in this video is to really understand the mental model of how to handle authentication, all the different pieces, and then you can make your own decision based on your project on how you want to proceed moving forward with all of this. And you now have a clear code example that is fully functional end to end and can be extended upon. This is, again, very simple, but you can extend and add your own logic to it. And you can now use this as a reference to then go and build your own authentication if you want, or if you just want to learn to actually learn from this and become a better React developer. And again, you can find this repository in the description. I highly recommend that you check this out because this is going to be the best way that you can learn authentication for yourself. And once again, I want to thank Eraser for sponsoring this video. It's really cool to be able to make super awesome whiteboards like this. And again, they have tons more features that I haven't shown in this video. I highly recommend that you check it out if you like this kind of stuff, or if you think you or your team could benefit from a proper whiteboarding solution. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos just like this one, make sure to leave this video a big thumbs up. You can also click here to subscribe, or you can click here to watch a different video of mine that YouTube seems to think that you're really going to enjoy. And with that being said, my name has been Darius Kozan. This is Kozan Solutions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.